Everyone, I think we are live. I hope we are live. I'm assuming you can hear me. I'm assuming I'm coming through your speakers loud and clear. Welcome to Equal Parenting Week. Welcome to the webinar. Why do dads need 6 months paternity leave? Why? What a question. That's what we're going to be addressing today. But before we do that, we have a short video we're going to play for you. Quick one. The sound is not working. So imagine the EastEnders theme tune in your head or something more happy. Golden by Jill Scott, whatever your soundtrack of choice. Imagine that in your head as this video is playing for you. It's funny, isn't it, how much of a difference music makes to our lives. When it's missing, you realize how important music is. But that was our little video to just talk to you a little bit about why we're here. So happy Equal Parenting Week. Happy Equal Parenting Week. My name is Elliot Ray. I'm the founder of Parenting Out Loud and Equal Parenting Week. Equal Parenting Week is about degendering caring responsibilities and creating equity at work and at home. And there's two main things we've really wanted to make sure are clear themes running through the week. The first is that this conversation this week is for everybody. It's not just for married, partnered couples, it's for co parents, it's for same sex couple families, it's for families with additional children with additional needs, and it's for parents with chronic health conditions. This conversation this week is for everybody. And we have made sure that is reflected in the content, in the webinars, in the events throughout the whole week. The second thing is that equal parenting is not always a 50-50 utopia. It's not us holding hands, skipping through the meadows with the rainbows and the unicorns. I wish it was. But often it's messy. But what it is the intention from both parents to share the care in a way that helps us all thrive at work and thrive at home in a way that works for us. And that is very, very personal to each individual family. But equal parenting is the intention to come to the table, to have those conversations and share the care in a way that works for us. So we have lots going on this week. Yesterday we had an amazing in-person launch and online launch hosted by Deloitte, which I am still buzzing from. We had an amazing employers talking about how they create family-friendly workplace cultures. We had Stella Creasy talking about the government's parental leave campaign, and we had couples sitting down for really, really honest conversations about how they share the care, and it was incredible to watch. It turned into a little bit of a therapy session, to be honest, but it was really, really, really good. We also have a billboard campaign, so you will see Equal Parenting Week billboards across the country. If you're in Westfield Shopping Centre, if you're in Leeds, if you're in Manchester, if you're at a service station on the M25, you will most likely see Equal Parenting Week billboards. And thank you to Talon who have supported us on that. We've got new research coming out. We have employers like Channel 4 and Volkswagen and Clifford Chance doing their own internal activity, which is incredible. We have Push for Paternity Leave on Saturday, our nationwide walk across the UK in London, Manchester, Leeds, and Nottingham, where we are taking to the streets asking the government to increase paternity leave. So on Saturday, join us. Bring your family, bring your pram, bring your nan, bring everyone and join us. It's going to be a great, great day. And this is important because we have a fight on our hands. There are people in media and politics that want to take us back to the 1950s. They want to take us back to the Handmaid's Tale. They believe childcare is women's work. And we are fighting for the narrative to create homes, relationships, workplaces where dads can be equal parents, where mothers can thrive at work and at home. And this is important because the motherhood penalty exists, families are struggling, and we need to really do more to create equity at home and at work. So today we are asking the very important question, why do dads need 6 months paternity leaves? Now, we are big advocates for 6 months paternity leave for equal parental leave. There are around 164 organizations in the UK who have introduced equal parental leave, and that is increasing. It's so important to equal parenting from the very start, so important to allowing dads to learn how to parent and really share the care from the very beginning. So today we're going to explore it more. We're going to hear from Helen Norman, who is a professor at Leeds University. She's going to talk about the impact of dad's involvement on childhood outcomes. We're going to hear from Ori Chandler, who's a head of D&I at Aviva. And she's going to talk about how their equal parental leave policy has supported dads, has created an equitable workforce, has impacted their retention, recruitment, and well-being. We're going to hear from Girai Karimli, who's a dad from Coots. He took 2 lots of 6 months maternity leave, and he's going to talk about some of the external barriers and pressures from family members and how he overcame that and what his leave meant for his family. And we're going to talk to Lucy Hodges from NatWest. She is a mother whose partner took enhanced paternity leave, and she's going to talk about how that has impacted her relationship and her career. At the end, we're going to bring all our speakers on for a Q&A. So as we go through, please do put in the chat any questions and we'll ask them to our speakers. So please, in the chat, introduce yourself, who you are, why you're here, where you work, and any questions as we go, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. So I'd love to introduce my first speaker, Helen Norman from the University of Leeds. Welcome to the stage, Helen. How are you?
Yeah, no, very good. Very pleased to be here. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks, Helen. So you've done some fantastic kind of like groundbreaking research at Leeds University about the impact on child development when dads are involved in the early years. So let's talk about that. First question, very simple. What is the impact of dad's involvement in the early years on child development?
Great, yes. Well, first thing to say, quite simply, is dad's involvement has a really important impact. And I come to this conclusion based on the findings from my research. So my project was at the University of Leeds, and it was called Paternal Involvement and Its Effects on Children's Education, or PEACE study for short, and it was in collaboration with the Father Institute. And we analysed data from about 5,000 two-parent mother-father households in England. So it's a very particular household type. But what that analysis showed was that fathers and mothers' engagement in kind of educational, interactive types of childcare activities, things like reading, playing games, that brought quite different things to the child's development. So we found that fathers' engagement was associated more with children's educational attainment at the start of primary school, whereas mothers' engagement was associated more with the child's kind of behavioural functioning in terms of sort of promoting better pro-social and emotional behaviour. So what this is suggesting is that both parents are really important in a child's life, but they're sort of the way they engage, their engagement kind of operates in quite different ways because they seem to be bringing quite different things to the child's development. And that's why it's important that we support both parents to be as involved as they can be.
That's really important. There was a very well-known American podcaster, masculinity influencer, who earlier on this year went on a podcast and said, dads don't really need any paternity leave. They're kind of useless in that first year,
Right.
ultimately. And this guy is like, as you would see, one of the good people, actually. He's
Yeah.
not necessarily in the manosphere. He's like one of what you would call the good guys. But he said that, and people
Gosh.
listened to it. And so from your experience, how does kind of paternity leave impact the well-being of the family? Are dads needed in that first year?
Yeah. I mean, they are because I think they do have an important impact. So if fathers are sort of given that time and space in the first year, it enables fathers to build a strong early bond with their child, grow into their role as a parent, develop, increase their confidence about being a dad. And obviously, all of that is going to have a positive impact on the father's well-being, on the child's well-being, and also, as you sort of said at the start, allowing fathers time off work in that first year also means that they can support their partner at a time that can be really sort of physically and emotionally demanding. And that can also improve maternal well-being and reduce stress in the household. So I think sort of taken together, the experience of early caregiving creates this more balanced dynamic at home, strengthens relationships, and it sets the foundation for more equal parenting in the long term. And actually, just to say that my research also showed that, when we're analysing these households, that if fathers were involved in the first year of parenthood, they were significantly more likely to remain involved as the child got older. So this suggests that being involved in that first year is really important because it sets up this pattern of involved fathering behaviour that persists over time. And then it brings me back to the same theme. This is why it's important to provide those conditions to enable fathers to be involved in that first year of parenthood so that they can develop their parenting roles, support the mother, support the child, and have better happiness and well-being, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it's well put. I once heard someone describe kind of family life as a carousel. And, a carousel, when it first starts spinning, you can kind of jump on. It's slow. You can step on, it's fine. But once that starts spinning quite fast after maybe the first year, it's quite hard to jump on because you might trip up, you might hurt yourself. There's not much space on there. It's going to be pretty fast. And so
Exactly.
if you're on from the beginning, you're on for the ride. And then as it gets faster, you're in. And I think
Yeah,
that's what paternity leave does. It allows you to jump on at the beginning and stay on.
exactly.
I want to kind of talk quickly a little bit more about your research. You said that dad's involvement does impact slightly different than mother's involvement, and it does
Mm.
lead to different outcomes. Can you talk a little bit more about what those outcomes are for children?
Yeah, so in that study we looked at sort of involvement in the preschool years and involvement sort of around at age 5 at the start of primary school, and we were looking at how this affects or is associated with educational attainment at the start of primary school at age 5 in the early years foundation stage profile, but also behavioural outcomes like emotions, pro-social behaviour, conduct, hyperactivity, things like that. So we was, like I said before, we found, both parents are really important, but they seem to be sort of having kind of different, operating in quite different ways and having different effects on these different aspects of a child's development.
Interesting. I think that's information we should all know. Because the conversation about this paternity leave is important for so many reasons. And I
Mm,
feel like it was so important to have you here because often that part of the conversation is missed out. And, we lend more towards other parts of the conversation, which are, of course, important, which we're going to touch on today. But the child development part of this is so key. And so I'm so glad you've been able to kind of share. And we're going to welcome you back at the end, Helen.
oh,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Um, okay, so next we have Ori Chandler, who's the head of D&I at Aviva. I have long admired Aviva. If I had a pound for every time I have spoken Aviva's name, celebrating their parental leave policy, I might be richer than I am now. I probably would be. They have been trailblazers in this space, and really, I think one of the first, if not the first, large employer offering equal parental leave. So it's incredible to have you here, Ori. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get straight into it. So,
Yeah.
what impact has your equal parental leave policy, where you offer 6 months paid leave, regardless of gender, to all parents? What impact has that had on retention and recruitment, well-being, and women's representation since it was introduced?
Thank you, Elliot. It is a real joy to be here and supporting Equal Parenting Week. So as you said, we launched our equal parental leave policy in 2017, All of our colleagues can take up to 12 months of leave with 6 months at full pay, regardless of gender, family structure. And of course, this is enabling our parents to really share that care from the very outset. And your question around impact, well, we've seen lots of different impacts really clearly. I think especially in terms of well-being and retention. So over the last 5 years, our policy has been taken more than 3,300 times. 500 colleagues, or more than 500, have taken it more than once. And I think, this repeat take up is interesting because it shows us that people trust the policy, right? They feel safe to stay and build a career with us. And they wouldn't do that if the policy felt risky or it was stigmatized or career limiting. And we also look at this through our employee life cycle insight. So we measure sentiment at key moments across the life cycle. So when people join Aviva, when people move, when they get promoted, when they return from parental leave. And across all of these different touch points, the top word that colleagues use consistently to describe our culture is inclusive. And equal parental leave is frequently referenced as one of the tangible reasons why. But it's probably the stories behind the data that really bring this to life. So I've heard some really powerful accounts from adoptive parents and particularly adoptive dads, because having that meaningful time at home is absolutely critical for bonding, for building routine and trust. And that takes time, especially, as you said, if children have complex care needs or they've experienced early life trauma. And our policy is enabling parents to have the time to build those relationships properly. And the colleagues in this situation are really, really clear. This wouldn't be possible under statutory paternity leave. And our policy has been critical to really enabling stability of the family. And I've also heard really powerful stories around well-being, particularly families navigating mental health. One story that I hear over and over again is where partners have historically struggled with postnatal depression or anxiety. And when fathers or partners have had to return to work quickly, the pressure that they feel and the pressure on the household is just immense. But when they're able to engage with our equal parental leave policy and take extended time off, the difference is profound, right? It's better recovery, stronger bonding, and much more stability for the whole family. You mentioned recruitment. Yeah. Recruitment, I think this policy has been a real differentiator. Perhaps not by the end of this week, Elliot, if you manage to get all of these
Sorry
organizations to convert. But it's really interesting because people have told us, from grads to the most senior hires, that equal parental leave really demonstrates that careers don't stop when parenting begins, and that's the culture that we're creating at Aviva, and absolutely people buy into that. And it's also had a positive impact on women's progression and representation. It's not a silver bullet, but it does remove some of the major structural barriers, because by equalising leave, we're reducing the assumptions about who's responsible for care. And I think that really supports more equal progression over time. And at Aviva, over 45% of our senior leaders are women. And of course, this directly correlates to a steady reduction in our gender pay gap. And I think that the last thing I'd mention here is that dads in leadership roles consistently tell us that taking equal parental leave has helped to make them better leaders, because this extended time at home helps to build empathy. It sort of sharpens priorities in many respects and shifts them to a more outcome-focused and trust-based way of working. And then that translates into stronger engagement, better judgment, and ultimately high-performing teams. So, really, really clear impacts for us: healthier families, stronger retention, informed leaders, and a sustainable pipeline.
Amazing. I get many organizations, like people in companies, saying, can you help with the business case to take to my senior leadership team? I think I might just play them that clip, Luce, Ori, and just say, look, just watch this. This lays out why it's good for your recruitment, your retention, your well-being, and your representation. So brilliant. Really, really good to hear you say that. Another question that I think will be on people's minds is that, we've seen organizations introduce these equal parental leave policies, and sometimes the take up from dads isn't as high as we would want it to be.
Mm.
So I'm really interested to hear about like what the take up has been, but also importantly as well, what have you done in the wider kind of culture to normalize dads taking 6 months off?
Yes, well, I think that actually the engagement and the take up that we've had from dads has probably been one of the most encouraging parts of this journey. So dads at Aviva are taking on average 22 weeks of parental leave, but the large majority are taking the full 6 months, so well over 80%. And I think that those stats are really important because it shows that it's not exceptional, right? It is normal. And we've deliberately tried to shape our culture through this and with this. So our equal parental leave policy, it doesn't sit in a silo, and we've really tried to shape wider family-friendly ecosystem that makes care visible and a legitimate part of everyday life at Aviva. And I think we have a good, solid bedrock of policies that reinforce that. So things like enhanced paid carers leave, urgent time off for dependents, flexible hybrid working at all levels, workplace adjustment passports that can evolve over time, through that parenting journey. And I think that when men see other men using these policies and being supported in the business, again, it's challenging that assumption that care is something that only sits with women. And it sends a really powerful message that care is legitimate and that we really support it at Aviva and that it's part of our everyday way of working. And I think it's that cultural permission that gives colleagues and especially dads the confidence to be really engaging with our policy and taking, that full suite of leave that we offer. Another really important aspect has been sponsorship, senior sponsorship and storytelling. Right from the beginning, when our policy was launched, we made sure that our leaders were actively championing it. And we encouraged dads across the business to share their stories. And leaders were encouraging people in their teams, especially dads, to take the leave. And when we've heard dads sharing their stories, including senior role models, again, it's really reinforcing that cultural permission. And we've had all sorts of community events, panels. We've talked about dad guilt, where people can speak really honestly about pressure and identity and the sort of expectations that are on them. And I think by getting all of those conversations, out in the stratosphere, it's reinforcing that cultural permission and demonstrating that we take it really, really seriously. I think there probably was a perception at the beginning, and there may be, a perception out in the world that taking extended leave might negatively impact a career. But we've really tried to tackle this head on. We've been really explicit that we don't want careers to suffer, and we've backed our policy with, all sorts of things like return to work coaching, flexible working, kit days, manager guidance. We also offer coaching to managers so that they feel equipped to support their people through the transition. In summary, a strong foundation of family-friendly policies that really underpins that culture, lots of role modelling and storytelling, as well as clear mechanisms in place to support colleagues through the transition and through their careers.
Brilliant. And that culture work is so key. It's so important, for the organizations listening, for the policy to be introduced. Obviously, that is a process of approval. But for it to land, for it to be normalized, to get the benefits, for dads to feel safe to take that, to line managers to understand their role in supporting that expectant dads, that culture change work is key. So it's great to hear how you've done that. So what advice would you give to anyone listening that's thinking about following in your footsteps? What advice would you have for them in terms of how do they get this through as a business case through their executive teams?
Well, first and foremost, feel free to share our story. We've got lots of stats and insights around the impact that this has and why this really works. In terms of sort of formulating your policy, keep it simple and make sure it's equal and really easy to understand. Equal pay and equal pay and equal leave are really signalling that care is valued, and that's the end of it. That point around culture. So culture matters as much as the policy. Make sure that you've got senior leaders to champion it, to role model it, to talk really openly and honestly about why it matters. And I do think that the male voice really, really matters here, because again, it's that male voice that is going to help shape that culture of permission, and sort of signal that actually this is the way we do things here. This is normal and accepted. And I think that broader ecosystem point is also important. So yes, this is a really powerful policy, but don't treat it as a single hero policy. Think about how you're going to support your people through all stages of that family life, thinking about flexibility, carers leave, well-being support, community. And related to that, think about how you're supporting people through the transition. How are you building manager confidence so that they feel able to support their people, and feel able to ensure that they're really supporting flexibility, because I think these are the things that help to make a policy sustainable, as well as protecting those sort of long-term career outcomes. And this is something we specifically look at Aviva. We look at how well managers are supporting people through the transition. And last year, more than 95% of our colleagues who took the leave said that they felt really supported by their managers. And this figure is increasing year on year. So, we're definitely moving in the right direction. And then the final thing that I'd say is that, this isn't just a benefit. Treat it as a long-term investment. At Aviva, we really see this as a driver of fairness, well-being. It helps to drive sustainable talent outcomes. And of course, there are really clear benefits for retention and attraction and gender equity and gender equality over time. So absolutely lean into this. It's that long-term view.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Ori. A pleasure to hear from you. We're going to welcome you back for the Q&A at the end, but thank you so much. Right. On to our next speaker, Gere Karimli. And we couldn't do this webinar without speaking to a dad who had taken 6 months paternity leave. And luckily we found one who'd done it twice, who'd taken 2 blocks of 6 months. So Gere, it's incredible to have you here. You work at Coots, you have 2 children, and I really want to kind of delve into your story. Starting from tell us a little bit about the experience of the 2 different births, how they shaped your role as a partner and a father, and particularly in the early weeks when your support was most needed.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot. And it's great to be here. We're making strides in the right direction, which is great. So I'd love to be part of this. So I think, thank you for the introduction. So yes, I took paternity leave twice, both very different experiences, both within 2 years of each other, so back to back. So whilst you may think that they were both very similar experiences, they couldn't be any more different, because that tends to be the norm. So I think in my case, something I'd like to make everyone aware of, or remind everyone of, is you're never as ready as you think you are when you're expecting a child. The challenges that are to come are unmatched to anything else. So I think as much as you can network, as much as you can prepare yourself mentally, you're never really as ready as you ever think you will be. So we all know that, giving birth is by far the most difficult thing and the most impressive thing a human person can do. And so it doesn't come without its complexities, both physically and mentally. So I think my personal circumstances, for example, with the birth of our first child, my daughter, we had some complications around my daughter's specific health. And in the second birth, we had some complications around my partner's health. And so you can imagine having that time off to really fully invest myself into my family, both mentally and physically, was irreplaceable. And having experienced those births, because no 2 births are the same, of course, I couldn't now comprehend what it would have been like if I only had a matter of a few weeks or perhaps a month or 2. Thankfully, we have an incredibly supportive organization, and I hope this obviously branches out further. And I think both being able to provide the support to my partner as well as the children was irreplaceable. As I said, it's not just a physical thing. I think everyone knows the difficulties, or tries to know the difficulties, of actually giving birth. But I think what comes after that, in the first few weeks of actually having a child, and maybe the first few months, both physically and mentally, is something that no one will ever be able to explain unless you really go through it. The tolls it has on mothers, both physically and mentally, and what toll that then takes on the wider household, the children, the upbringing, and of course, making sure that everyone mentally, more than anything, is in the right space. So just being able to have that time, not having to worry about going back to work tomorrow or what meeting I have in a week's time, or even having to sleep on time to wake up on time to sign on to work was huge. Just being able to fully invest myself in my family's well-being and what the right thing was irreplaceable.
Yeah, it's so good to hear you say that. I think what you're saying there in regards to you're never ready is so key.
Yeah.
And the 2 weeks statutory you have is no way long enough to adapt to the new life of caring for a whole new other person.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. And when I spoke to you, before, we had a really good conversation about kind of external views and opinions that can shape our behavior and our choices. And I know from speaking to so many dads who are in organizations where equal parental leave is on offer, sometimes it's the organizational culture which can be a barrier. But often it can be external barriers that come in the shape of lovely friends and family and their words and their own ideas about masculinity and their own opinions on what a man and a dad should do. So I really want to hear from you around some of the kind of resistance or people who weren't quite sure about your decision to take 6 months off twice. What were those conversations like, and how did you kind of overcome that to do what you wanted to do, what you knew was going to be best for your family?
Yeah. And I mean, thanks, Ellie. I think that's probably the biggest factor, at least that I had to face personally. And I would presume that a lot of dads are in similar situations. So firstly, you're absolutely right. There's external and internal factors, both from third parties, but also, for yourself in your mind, in the way we're ingrained, depending on your upbringing as well. So I think from a work perspective, thankfully, we had a very trusting organization, a very good leadership. It was spoke about in an incredible way. So for my personal circumstances, I was actually the first dad in my department to take the leave. There were dads in the wider bank that took the leave, which was great, but no one in the exact same position as me with the exact same role. And of course, that naturally formed some barriers in my mind, as there was no one to really relate to or to pick up with. So I did spend some time networking with wider leadership, networking with the individuals who actually, thankfully, put into place this policy, with the support, and similarly other dads in other areas of the bank who are taking the leave to really sort of, I guess, quieten down the concerns I had in my mind from an internal perspective. Because naturally, and this relates to both mums and dads, you're worried about whether your job is still going to be here when you come back. You're worried about whether this is going to hinder progression. And for myself, for example, I'm the sole breadwinner of this household. And you work, and both mums and dads work incredibly hard to get to this point. And then you think, if I take this time away, albeit for an incredible purpose, is this going to ruin all these years of work? Is it going to cause issues afterwards? And so that was a real concern, which thankfully, with great organization, great support and policies and leadership, we managed to overcome that to a degree. I think the other factor, which you mentioned, is more important, which is the external factors, because whilst work was great, I think we come from, so firstly, there's the manosphere, if that's how you're going to refer to it. It's not technically, in some people's mindset, a man's job, quote unquote, to take the partner leave, to take the time away from work, to spend the time with the children, help with the upbringing of them in the first few weeks, at least the first few months. There's also a cultural factor here. So thankfully in the UK, we're very diverse when it comes to culture, which I think is why conversations like this are incredible, because everyone has different upbringings, different backgrounds. And so hearing from different cultural backgrounds is irreplaceable. So for myself, for example, I come from a stereotypical manosphere, masculine culture where gender roles are very black and white. It's you work as the man till you retire, and then of course you have the mum of the household who will look after the children, raise them and everything. And so of course when I started having these conversations with my family, inclusive my wife as well, my partner, about taking the time off, naturally the first barrier I had was, is this the right thing to do? Again, is this going to impact your career? You're the one obviously supporting the household. Is this going to be a problem? And similarly, some less important factors as to what will some people think, or what will some family members think, relatives, which is neither here nor there, of course. But I think the the way I overcame this was really, I had to really take some time away from everything, from work, from household, from family, and really just explore that in myself as to what my priorities were. We're in an ever-changing world, and so the cultural things, whilst they're ingrained in me from childhood, of course, it's something that as dads we need to be able to overcome. I think the support that I was able to provide to my family, my partner, my children, again, is something that can't ever be replaced and would only have been able to be provided on the basis of me taking this time. And so I think we're doing well in trying to wash out those gender stereotypes, which is important. And similarly, of course, we see the benefits in our children and the bonding as well, which we'll come on to discuss, I'm sure. But I think these external factors, and both internally from work, internally from family, but as I said, even from my partner in the same household, are things that will always be relevant. And I would encourage dads who are in similar situations, and I know there'll be a large majority that are, to really network with other dads who have taken this leave. I think really prioritize partners and families, and realize, obviously, the reality of it is the struggles you're going to face, and same as ourselves, remain within this ceiling, this roof. So as much as there's external factors and ingrained cultural differences, at the end of the day, when you do have that child and you face these complications, you're a unit against the world, basically, in a cliche way. And so it doesn't really matter what everyone else says. And so we really saw the impact of that, taking that time off, especially, as I mentioned, because of the various complications that presented itself. And eventually, parents and family were very understanding. It's just it's a different generation. It's a different cultural background. It's just education more than anything else.
So powerful. I think what you've just articulated there is what I think most dads are experiencing. That kind of external pressure and the what are people going to think is, I don't have anyone in my family that's done this before. Is it going to be okay when I go back to work? Is my job still going to be there? And you've articulated that so powerfully. So thank you so much. And I love the fact that you were saying, you took some time to reflect on what was important to you, and then you networked with other men who had introduced the policy or had taken the leave, and kind of built that community around you for support. So powerful. You kind of touched on a little bit there in regards to how this has impacted the bond with your babies. Now, obviously, you don't know any different. You've taken the 6 months twice, so it's hard to compare what it could have been. But what would you say, and from your feeling, how has you been around in those early months? How do you think that has kind of impacted the bond with your children? And also, do you have any kind of like last words for dads who are unsure? Dads who are watching this now or on the playback, they're unsure about what they should do. What would you say to those dads?
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredible point to discuss. So I think firstly, with regards to the bonding, we all know even before the child is born, the child will recognize your voice, not just for mums, but also for dads. That's why we always encourage, speak to your child even before they're born, get them to recognize your voice. And you'll notice, and again, not to teach people how to know this, of course, but you'll notice when your child is born, genuinely, as soon as their eyes open, they are following your voice, they do recognize you, and they are comfortable with you. So I think focusing on that and spending the early weeks and months really improving that is impeccable. It's something you need to do. I think the reality is bonding with my children in the early months at the very least, making the alternations with my wife as to who is going to be up at what time, who is going to feed them, who's going to change them, and everything like that. Our children became so comfortable with both of us that it was almost as if they couldn't really separate us. They couldn't differentiate us. And that was incredible. And I think for further context on there, again, I'll relate to, I guess, what it's been like over the previous decades or whatever it is in different cultures as well. I grew up in a household that was very much mom of the house is the person who is your go-to. You see them from the minute you wake up to the minute she puts you to sleep. And dads, you would rarely see them until perhaps very late evenings because they're at work all day. And so there was always a fine line. There was a curtain between children and parents. I think predominantly in my generation, but significantly in the wider cultures as well, which I think those early weeks and months of bonding really manages to trump. So right now, for example, as much as they make it difficult to work because they're now attached to me, it's an incredible situation. And it's a case of, if my partner is unwell, or if my partner is if there's external factors that require her attention, I know I'm comfortable not only in my own ability to be able to service the needs of the children, but also comfortable on the basis that they are equally comfortable reaching out to myself. And I think that's incredibly important. I think again, personally, and this is similar to my partner as well, as we come from the same cultural background, the curtain we have in terms of reaching out to our fathers, for example, for assistance, even at this age, is paramount to the upbringing we had. Fathers in our culture were always the providers, the protectors, which is still the case, but we lacked that extra stability that we needed from a fatherhood perspective. And I think that's what, at least in this household, we're very adamant that we're trying to knock out of the park. That's not something we want to be prevalent in future generations, especially for our children. And we see the fruit of that. It's incredible, I think. And as we touched on previously, the development impact that both mums and dads have on the children are very different. And you genuinely do see that. So it's not just about, I've read up a lot of studies, but aside from that, you see it in action. The relationship they have with both parents is irreplaceable to each other. They can't be compared. And you can see the well-being of the child is just through the roof because they have the best of both worlds. So I think that's the main thing I'd touch on with regards to bonding in relationship. And similarly, for the advice to dads watching this who are, I guess, shying away from taking this leave, if you are thankfully working in a company that has got enhanced paternity leave, honestly, it's not that there are these obvious concerns that even though I'm telling you this, you will still have prevalent in your mind. I think what you have to understand is we are going to work, to put it frankly, we are going to be working until our retirement age. Work will never go anywhere. And this is something that internal leadership was always very clear to me. It's a case of if touch wood something was to happen to you, you'd be replaced very, very quickly. And so I think integrating your trust in your organization from an early stage is important. Definitely reach out to those that you need. But equally remember that the child's upbringing and the time you're going to have in your child's life at that stage is very, very short. Even in ours, I mean, the time flies so quickly that you realize actually it's almost like you haven't been away from work. So do take that time away. The time that you have with your children in their first few years before they go to nursery and school will never return. And so that foundation that you're going to build with them from a bonding perspective is something that you will always regret if you don't take the time off. I think even when you have the time off, you will always wish you went back and done more because you realize how quickly time genuinely does go. And it's always that famous saying of, you're going to know your children as adults for the majority of life more than you are as children. And until they really go to school, you're talking, 3 years, 2 years of really bonding with your child. So those first few months, if you have the opportunity, absolutely take it. Absolutely support your partners where you can and support your children because it's going to be impeccable for their growth and their resilience in the world in the future.
So well said. I think you've recruited an army of dads there taking equal parental leave. So powerfully said. Thank you so much. Amazing words. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go to Lucy. So, we couldn't do this conversation about Gere and a dad. We needed a dad's perspective, but also we can't do the conversation about our mum's perspective. So we are delighted to have Lucy Hodges from NatWest. So Lucy's partner has taken 2 lots of enhanced parental leave, shared parental leave. So Lucy's going to talk to us from a mother's perspective, how that impacted her well-being and her career. So, shared parental leave, there's lots of controversy around it. As a macro policy, it hasn't necessarily worked, but for individuals, for yourself, it has been really, really good. It does mean the mother has to give up some of her leave though. So Lucy, what drove your decision to take shared parental leave, and how did that choice kind of shape your vision and your partner's vision for equal parenting from the outset?
Yes, I'd say back in 2017 was when when we had our first, and back then we only had the 2 weeks, the standard 2-week parental leave. I'm pleased to say now that since then we have now launched equal parenting leave in the last few years, to the point where actually when we launched that, my husband turned around and said, do you fancy going for a third? And I was like, no. So yeah, we would have absolutely loved the chance to have equal parenting leave at the time. But back then it was just the 2 weeks, and we both knew that wasn't going to be enough, and it wasn't the grounding that we both wanted to start with our family. We were equally both so excited to be starting a family, and why is it that I only get that time off to bond with our children? It just didn't seem fair. And shared parental leave was a policy that was available to us. It had launched a few years earlier. And I knew that from the beginning, even before getting pregnant, that that's what we would take up. Not only had I been very vocal and active in the workplace around driving gender equality at work and being part of our women's network for a number of years, not only was it about role modeling this and practicing what I've been preaching, but yeah, fundamentally it just didn't seem fair. And if I wanted to start this parenting journey as equal partners, then it just seemed fair that we would go down the shared parental leave route, even if it meant, as you said, that I had to give up and sacrifice some of my leave to be able to enable that. And yes, I think that's the thing that I had to overcome, because and others also that would comment on our situation would be, oh, why are you giving up some of your leave? That's your entitlement. And I think, well, actually, if I want to start this journey on equal footing, I can't see that as my entitlement. It's ours, So I had to go. Yeah, that was what I had at the time, parental leave. So I gave up some of my time so that we could share that between us.
Mm. Yeah, and I love even when we met before, and you said, if I wanted equal parenting afterwards, I have to kind of share the leave at the beginning. I think that's just I hadn't heard it put that way actually before, and so that was quite a interesting and a beautiful way of putting it. So how would you say your husband taking that leave, that paternity leave, that shared parental leave, how has that impacted on you in regards to your work, your well-being, your return to work, your confidence as a working parent? Talk to us about what impact it's had on you as an individual.
Yeah, no, it's been an absolute massive bonus for us. And in terms of how we worked that split between us, we worked it based on kind of the annual calendar really. And so my daughter was born in the March, and then a few years later my son came in the April. And then how we split our parental leave was, I went back to work in the following January, because it just felt right to start the new year going back to work. And then my husband Paul finished off his year at the end of the year. So the split worked. He had 3 months with my daughter, the last 3 months with my daughter, and he had the last 4 months with our son. And when I went back to work both those times, as everyone can probably appreciate, I've gone through that as well. It can be quite overwhelming going back to work after any prolonged period of time. And one thing that I didn't have to worry about in amongst all of that was I didn't have to worry about where my child was. I didn't have to navigate dropping them off at nursery and effectively handing them over to a stranger, and then having to go back to work and navigate all of that at the same time. So I went back to work and was able to confidently return to work, focus on me, focus on the work, when I knew that my child was at home in their usual setting with their dad, going to the same baby classes that they'd always been going to. And I didn't have to, that was one worry that I didn't have to worry about. So I could just focus on going back to work. I went back to work earlier, got back onto the job at hand. And I also had phased return for the first few months when I went back to work, had a phased return, which in between going back to work and not being the primary caregiver at the time, because that was handed over to my husband, I actually selfishly got a few moments to myself, and actually went to the gym a few times. So
Lovely.
actually that was great for the well-being point of view. So phasing back to work whilst also getting a bit of me time after a few months of being in the trenches, if you like.
Yeah, and that's an important point. Looking after yourself, the time not at work, not parenting, being in the gym, going for walks, seeing your friends, being a normal human being, like that's really important. And I think we miss that part of the conversation sometimes, but it's always something that comes up with the dads that we do work with. So let's talk about kind of like that early foundation. So you shared that leave. How has that translated into now? So your kids are going to school. Talk to us about how you feel like sharing the care and the paternity leave at the beginning has shaped your sharing of the care now. What does that look like in your household?
Yeah, I think it really, really did set us up for success on kind of that equal footing. And with everything that we do, we really aim to share as much as possible, and there is no kind of default parent. And during that time, and him having that prolonged period of time off, really gave us both the confidence, him the confidence to parent alone and know that all the ins and outs and nuances that come with that, and also giving me the confidence that he could do it alone. He didn't need me to hold his hand and tell him what to do. And I think it just gave us both confidence in our ability to both parent, and I'm not more equipped than him, and he's not more equipped than me. We're both equal in terms of that care, and how that's translated to now is that even day-to-day things like, like example, we take it in turns whose night it is, and that was more critical back in the day when they would be up, countless times in the night, I'm sure, and not so much now, although that I'm going to touch wood because it is actually my night tonight. So now that I've said that, they're probably going to be up tonight.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for you, Lucy.
Fingers crossed, I know. But even now, so we take it in turns and we alternate our night on or morning on with the children. And it means that the other parent whose night it isn't and whose morning it isn't, it means that they can either have a lay-in, they could, get up and go for a run or go to the gym, or they could even, log on early as well, depending on what they wanted to use that time with. So we've just got that rhythm going that we really try and share everything as much as possible between us.
Such an important point. I think a massive part of Parenting Out Loud and Equal Parenting Week is just really highlighting that supporting dads from the very beginning supports the motherhood penalty. The vast majority of the gender pay gap in this country is the motherhood penalty. And the way we equalize that and reduce that is supporting dads to be equal caregivers from the very beginning. And that starts with as soon as that child is born. So thank you, Lucy. What we're going to do, we're going to bring everyone up on the screen. If you're listening here, we've got people in the chat. Ask questions. You have a professor from Leeds University here, Helen. You have Ori at Aviva, who introduced and is spearheaded equal parental leave. You have Girai, a dad, amazing testimony. You have Lucy, a mum whose partner took extended leave. So any questions for our panel, please put them in the chat. So while people are thinking about their questions, I will kind of throw one out to all of you, I guess. And quick fire response. Let's do a quick fire round. So my question is, if you could change one thing about the cultural narrative around dads and paternity leave, what would it be? Okay, so you have power to change the media cultural narrative. What would you like to be seen? I want quick fire responses from all of you. So Helen, what do you think?
Gosh, that's a big one, isn't it?
It's a big question. We don't do it little questions over here.
The cultural narrative. I mean, I think that the key thing is it's care, isn't it? It's like, it's good and it's okay for men and dads to care. And it's totally, this has to sort of be changed, I think. It has to become more acceptable. And it was really interesting listening to Garay and talking about, the organisational culture and all the pressures from society and peers. Are you doing the right thing? And it's kind of that's all triggered by the fact that, care, this isn't seen as the natural thing for dads to do, men to do. And so this really does need to change, I think. And because fathers are good at care, they're really good at it. And, this has benefits for children, for families, as we've all discussed. So I think that's the thing that really needs to change.
So I think I lied. I said we're going to go to everyone, but we're not, because we've got some questions in now. So we're going to circle back to that at the end. But thank you for that reflection, Helen. Question, I think, for you, Ori, from Kyle. Hi, Kyle. Kyle says, hi, my employer only offers the standard 2 weeks. To start the conversation of change, is the best place to start with speaking to HR. So Ori, one for you.
Yeah, I mean, HR are going to shape your policies and deliver the policies, and they're going to be the part of your organisation that would own this. So certainly speaking to senior leaders in your HR function is a really good place to start. But maybe speak to some other senior leaders in the business as well who really want to get behind this. The positive outcomes are so clear. We've seen real business benefits. This isn't about a short-term view. There's clearly a cost associated with it, but it's about that long-term investment, because it's much better to retain your brilliant people. We know it's much more expensive to hire new people. So and this also leads to much more sustainable talent outcomes. And we've had we heard from Helen about the amazing impact this has on the outcomes for children, that educational attainment piece. I mean, that isn't something we've talked about in our business, but I'd really like us to start looking at that. So certainly speak to your HR senior HR leaders, because they're the ones that would own the policy. But maybe you could get some sort of sponsor or advocate within the business to say, do you know what? This is really going to make a difference for us. I think that could be a really powerful route.
I agree. I think finding that senior sponsor is really important. Someone's a champion for you who has that authority and influence is key. Next one, I'm going to post to you, Lucy. So obviously you're in a big organization. You work in the inclusion team, but you may have thoughts on this. So someone has asked, what are your thoughts, or do you have any suggestions about people looking to make change in the public sector, especially ones with significant budget issues? What are your thoughts on potentially what they could do?
I think to Ori's point as well, I think really highlighting the business case benefits of this and the outcomes that this will drive. So, and really focusing on the fairness of this, like for all involved, for all parents, no matter what your blended family may look like, but all parents should have the equal opportunity to be there and look after their children and to care for their children, to bond with them, and also like to Helen's point there in terms of the development outcomes that has for the children as well, the benefits. So I would really stress those business case points as well.
Yeah, I agree, and also if you have budget restraints, you may not be able to offer 6 months. But you could offer 6 weeks paid, which is still much better than 2 weeks statutory, and that will make a difference. Actually, 6 weeks paid will make a significant difference. So maybe it's just looking at how can you incrementally increase, maybe not looking at the large employers as a benchmark, because it may not be realistic for you, but you can still increase above the statutory and make a real difference as well. So thank you for the question. Thank you, Lucy. Okay, one for you, Geray. Someone has asked, what can dads do themselves to improve societal position on equal parenting?
That's a really good question, actually. And it's an interesting one, because I think when I was going through it, if you remain within your circle of friends or family and you mention it, most of the time your friends will always say, it's a no-brainer, take it and that's always the concept, right? It's always the thought of having this partner leave, a parental leave is going to be time off, essentially like an extra holiday, which it isn't, of course. I think the more important thing here is I think it's the network, both internally from your workplace, but also externally. And so personally, we had a few sessions where I went into some of the my old workplaces as well. And effectively, it's just spreading the word and spreading the importance of it, and sort of referencing Equal Parenting Week, referencing webinars like this for organizations to really adhere to. And I think just those small movements, whether it's, for example, in my situation, my previous NatWest branch, just going in there and really speaking to everyone only over the course of 10, 15 minutes really works wonders, because word of mouth just spreads like wildfire. So I think it's just making that resonate with everyone as the importance of it. So outside of your social group in terms of your friends, because they will always be supportive, you'd hope, so that's different. But I think if you really want to go the extra step, is to really introduce these policies to previous employers, previous colleagues, future colleagues, and just really spread that word, because it genuinely does not take a long or a huge amount of speaking before this really spreads, because it's a no-brainer to a lot of individuals. So as soon as you really plant that seed, it will just spread like wildfire.
Yeah, great advice. I used to work in the NatWest branch myself as well, started in Kingsbury and Wembley in Northwest London, so some shared history there.
Yeah.
But I would say join Parenting Out Loud, follow us, join our newsletter, turn up to our events, share Equal Parenting Week, join on Saturday. We've got the march nationwide. Get involved in the various campaigns, share our materials online. There's loads that you can do. You can be as involved as you would like, but you can make a difference. I want to check with the panel. We're at 1 o'clock. Who needs to go? Does anyone need to go now? Does anyone have 7 more minutes? Yeah. Okay, cool. I just want to get through these questions. So great, fantastic. Let's go to one for you, Helen, from Jess. So Jess is saying, how can we change the narrative that being a good mum is taking your 12 months maternity leave and allow space for dads to be more involved parents? What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, this is and this is still, I think these kind of social norms, being a good mum is being at home looking after the preschool child, taking that time out. They're still really strong in society and quite hard to shift. And also, incidentally, I'm doing some current research with a new survey, and that shows a really high proportion of fathers still feel this pressure to be a breadwinner, and that's across all different types of fathers. So those social norms are still very much in society and quite hard to shift. How we change that, that's the $1 million question. I think just everything we've discussed so far, fathers just taking more leave, introducing these more rights for fathers in workplaces, flexible working, longer leave so fathers can do more caregiving, be more present at home, because that's going to help to shift the narrative that it's mums that should be the primary carers and doing that sort of work. So I think it's a whole host of things we need to do, but there's quite a long way to get there. And one of the things is better paternity leave rights. And then once we start getting more and more fathers doing this and this becoming the norm, it can start to shift some of those embedded narratives and social norms. But it's quite a hard thing to do, I think.
Yeah. Lucy, any reflections on that?
Well, yeah, I suppose I was going to build on this as well, because I think that there's also a role that mums can take in this as well, in terms of leaning into the shared responsibility a little bit more. And I suppose I'm reflecting on the example with our WhatsApp group. Most people might be part of a school WhatsApp group, for instance, and mostly it's the mums that are in that group. Mostly it's the mums taking on the school admin. And recently, my husband, he's part of that WhatsApp group, but he organised our child's our son's birthday party. I took my daughter's, he took our son's. We split that between us, and yet there's still people that are coming to me about details about the party or inviting me to parties, and I'm like, well, actually, no, my husband's involved in that one, so don't add me to the WhatsApp group, add him. And I think there's a few things that we can do to just be mindful of not defaulting to the mums ourselves, because I think that does happen quite a bit, and I suppose it is only natural as well. But how can we bring them in and bring the dads into those conversations a little bit more? And I think I can see another question coming in around going to, and my husband experienced this as well, taking their child to some of those baby groups and some of those mum groups, and him often being the only dad in the room. And how can we invite them in and make them feel part of it as well? And how do we normalise it a little bit more so they're not the only dad in the group and they kind of feel excluded? So they don't have that same support network that maybe the mums do when they're off. And how can we bring the dads into the fold a bit more?
Thank you. And let's go on to that question then from Joe. My husband is currently on 8 months of shared parental leave with our 5-month-old. He would like to go to a baby group, but he doesn't feel very welcome. A lot of them are designed as supportive female spaces with new mums who may be struggling. Did you encounter this at all? How do we change them to make them more welcoming to men? Gere, what would your advice be for dads who don't feel comfortable going to the baby groups? And also, how do we change them to be more welcoming for dads as well?
Sort of a good question. And I have experienced this. I think, we've got baby groups right next to our house. And for the past 2 years where I've been going with my daughter and my son, I'm definitely the only dad that's there. And to be honest, I think, so this is not something done at a macro level. I think individuals are going to be the ones that make this change. I think me going there consistently at the start, even from the teachers and the people that were working there would not look at me in a strange way, but you almost felt the atmosphere that you were not unwelcome, but it was a little strange that you were the person there. And I think initially what we started to do, even for myself personally, I felt a little bit awkward doing it initially. So I spent a lot of time, we would go as a unit. We would go, me and my wife, both children, we would go all together every single time. I really spent time getting to know the individual working there, of course, the teachers, really understanding their programs before eventually just attending them myself. I won't say that I've seen many dads attend following my attendance alone, but I have seen them incorporated with their partners. So I think, to be honest, the only way to really drive this narrative or to knock out that stereotype is just to make those movements. You need to attend those baby groups. If it gives you reassurance, go with your partner, go with your children, don't do it alone. Because you're right. Sometimes what you all often find at these baby groups, what I found myself is when the babies are sort of playing and the toddlers are playing, most mums tend to gravitate to each other and they will spend their time talking about the children and things and really networking. And as a dad, being the only dad in the room, it felt kind of awkward to join them, being the man and there's no other men there. But I think over time, after bringing my partner with me and, you know, arranging those informal introductions, it became a lot more comfortable doing so. So I think it's not a macro situation. It's very much personally, we're still quite early in this process. You probably will be one of the initial people to circumvent this. You need to start and make those movements, but do it with your partner. Speak with the other professionals there. See if there's any other dads that are also attending certain events, and you can always network with those. But these slow movements will have bigger effects in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. I used to go to baby massage, which I loved. And also there was dads groups as well. And there are more dads groups popping up. And I think it's for like dads to find out what's going on in their local area. It may be local, they may have to travel, but turn up, support those groups. You know, sometimes dads put those on and they find it difficult to get dads through the door. So dads have to just turn up and support what's going on. There will be initiatives not too far from where you live, I'm sure, if you have a look. Okay, last question. Ori, did you see a reduction in your gender pay gap after introducing equal parental leave?
Well, in short, yes. So our pay gap, and I think probably most pay gaps that organizations are facing, are driven by the distribution of men and women across a business, with a higher proportion of men in senior roles. And since introducing our policy, we've seen a steady increase of women into senior leadership roles. And as I mentioned before, we now have over 45% of women in senior leadership at Aviva. So yes, that has absolutely correlated with a reduction in the gender pay gap.
Fantastic. And a great way to end. We've gone over, but this conversation was never going to fit in an hour. So an hour and 10, I think we did well. We covered so much. And first of all, I want to say a massive thank you to Helen, to Gerai, Lucy, Ori. A pleasure to have you speaking. You were all brilliant, so powerful, so many different amazing points made from different points of the conversation. But I think we really delved into why this is important. So thank you so much for your time, for supporting Equal Parenting Week. Round of applause for our panelists, please. I would assume everyone is doing that round of applause. I trust you. And secondly, thank you to the attendees, to everyone. I know some people need to drop off at 1 p.m. They have other meetings to attend. But everyone that's joined, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for supporting Equal Parenting Week. Thank you so much for asking your questions. Hopefully you have learned some stuff today that you can implement in your organizations in regards to putting a proposal together to enhance your paternity leave. But also you may have learned something individually in regards to your own family, your own perspectives, your own ideas, perspectives on what you maybe think is right or wrong, and what you want to do around paternity leave and sharing the care. And that's what we aim to do. You know, it's all about systemic change, but it's also about individual change within relationships as well. So it's been a pleasure. We have loads of things going on throughout the week. Go to equalparentingweek.com and you'll see information about all our events, our webinars, our billboard campaign, our new research, all the stuff going on. We have employers doing their own activities as well. So maybe you're dialing in one of our watch along parties as an employer supporting Equal Parenting Week. So on that note, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday afternoon, and we'll see you again. Take care.
Thank you. Cheerio.
Tell you.